All right, good afternoon. I'm just going to run through what's happened out here. So last night at about 6:30 p.m., the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, FWC, the Coast Guard were notified of an incident that happened here in the pass between the south end of St. Pete Beach and Shell Key. There was a vessel by the name of Jaguar. It's a 71-foot Sea Ray. There was a charter vessel that came out of Maximo Marine's Marina. The vessel is a charter of FWC, which is Florida Yacht Charters. The vessel is being captained by Todd Davis, a white male, 525 of 66, and he had some crew members on board. They took it out of Maximo Marine's because the vessel had been chartered by a group of 15 Chinese students from Colorado State University who are here on spring break. These students were in the Orlando area. They booked the charter online, and it was a 4-hour charter that they paid $2,000 for to take them out into the Gulf for a cruising type charter. When Davis picked them up and was heading out to the Gulf, they got here to the pass, and it was so rough and the conditions were such that he couldn't take them out there. So he anchored here in the pass, and there was some discussion between the students and Davis about being able to get in the water, do some snorkeling, etc. There seems to be a little bit of a dispute, if you will, or a he said, she said about what happened next, but the students say that they asked for permission to get in the water. Davis didn't say they couldn't. Davis says he told them not to because it was too rough. So that part of it we're still trying to flush out and is under investigation. Nonetheless, there were 5 of the students who jumped into the water. And one of the students is a person by the name of Ji Liu, and his first name is J-I-E, last name is L-U-O. He's a Chinese male with a date of birth of 10/30/1995. So Liu and several of these other kids, 4 other kids, jumped off the vessel 3 times. They would jump into the water, it was cold, get back in, jump in, cold, get back in. The current was very strong out there, very choppy, very tough weather conditions, and it appears they were getting fatigued as they were jumping into the water and then trying to get back to the vessel. On the 3rd time that they jumped in, Liu had trouble getting back to the boat, and the current was very strong, and the current was going out into the Gulf. So at that point, it was obvious that Liu was in distress, and one of the crew members, Andrew Dillman, is a white male, date of birth September 30, 1989, without any life preservers, without any life-saving devices, without anything, jumped into the water to try and rescue Liu. At that point, both of them were swept in the current and were swept out towards the Gulf. Davis became aware of the distress and tried to pull the anchor up and could not find them once he pulled the anchor up. He had also tried to throw some life-saving devices, life jacket, etc., but with the wind, it actually took those life-saving devices in a different direction than they were. So they were being pulled out. The last anybody saw them, they were in the current, they were being pulled out into the Gulf. Again, he tried to pull the anchor up and couldn't find them. So there was drinking going on the boat. There's no indication from, at this point in the investigation, that Davis or any of the crew members were intoxicated. Again, there was drinking, there were coolers, there was champagne, beer, wine, alcoholic beverages. We're in the process now of trying to identify all of the other students that were on the boat and to interview all of them. They all returned to Orlando. We have detectives that have gone over to Orlando. They're due to return to Colorado State tomorrow. We've been in contact with Colorado State University Police trying to get some more information. We have notified because he is a foreign exchange student from China, we've notified the Chinese consulate in Houston of this incident. Dillman's mother has been notified, and she is on her way here from New York, where she lives. Liu's family in China has been notified, and they're making decisions as to whether or not they're going to come. At this point, this is still in a search mission that is jointly being conducted by the United States Coast Guard, Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, and FWC. We have aircraft, we have boats. We will continue this. We started it last night at 6:30. There were assets on scene all through the night. We scaled them back a little bit during the late night and early morning hours. Resumed it again in full force at 7 o'clock this morning. As you see, there's many assets out here, and we will continue this and have assets out here through the night and continue this on. We'll have to make a decision at some point here in the next day or a couple days, but experience tells us, we've been through this before, that we need to keep this going. So that's what we're going to do, and continue the investigation and see where it takes us. We still have some unanswered questions on some things, but that's the best information I have for you at this point. I'm happy to take any questions, and we have the Coast Guard is here also, and they can share any information or answer any questions that you have.
Mr. Davis, you said there was some he said, she said,
right.
Back and forth.
Right.
What exactly is he saying?
Well, what he's saying again is they engaged the charter for a cruising charter, not to go in the water. You can have a snorkeling charter, you can have charters where you go in. And supposedly the way they booked it was strictly a cruising charter. And he intended to take them out into the Gulf. But they got here to the pass to get out into the Gulf, and it was too rough. So he decided to anchor because he couldn't take them out there. And then at that point they asked if they could snorkel and if they could get in the water. And he says he told them it was too cold, it was too rough, and recommended against it. They say, from again, this is preliminary at this point, but they say that he didn't tell them they couldn't do it, and they got in and out of the water 3 times, and he was observing it, and they were doing this. So we're still trying to flush all that out. But again, they stopped here because of the weather conditions, and they couldn't get out into the Gulf, which is what they intended to do for this 4-hour cruising charter.
So when you say from experience tells you should stay out here, what does that mean? There's still hope that they could be?
I think that yes. You know, and while the conditions are very tough conditions, it's still possible that they're alive, and that's the way that we are proceeding at this point. You never know what can happen out there or where they might be, so we're still in a search mode, and we'll continue in that mode. And again, we believe that, and again, from experience, and we've dealt with these situations before, that that's the right thing to do, and we need to continue this.
What if that turns out to be the case, and they did let these students swim in the water? I mean, yesterday and even today, I mean, the conditions out there are just so dangerous.
Right, and certainly, that would be looked at, and whether that amounts to anything more than something that might be the subject of civil litigation, I can't tell you. It's all under investigation, and I'll let the Coast Guard talk about this a little bit, because as far as any, it is a charter boat. It is licensed, and any investigation along those lines most likely would be conducted by the Coast Guard. But it is a joint investigation between the Sheriff's Office and the Coast Guard at this point. We're looking at all aspects of it. We're looking at all angles of it. And we want to make sure we're thorough, and we do the best we can to get all of the facts so we can evaluate it properly.
But what about just your message to anybody? I mean, we have so many spring breakers, people out here. The water still today is so dangerous. I mean, nobody should be in that water. Well,
I agree with you. Is that, from looking at it out there, I don't think anybody should be in the water, especially, and I don't know, what kind of experienced swimmers there were. But the current is extremely strong. It's extremely rough, and most likely people shouldn't be in there. This is a very sad, very tragic situation. Certainly Dillman tried to be a hero, tried to rescue this kid, and tried to help, and probably at his own peril, and has put himself certainly in great jeopardy. So people should heed the warnings and look at what is going on out there, and it is very, very rough. And there was alcohol involved. I can't tell you because we don't know. Were they to the point where they're intoxicated? That'll be part of the investigation. Was Lou intoxicated? I don't know. Could that have impaired his ability to get back after a couple times? Those are all valid questions that we'll have to try and sort out through the investigation. But it's a very, very rough environment, and especially with that current. And once that current grabs you, you're gone. And you can be the strongest swimmer in the world. Is that it's taking you out, you're not going to fight it back.
Did they ever see the crewman who jumped in for the one guy who's being swept out? Were they ever sighted making contact together?
Not that I know of. He was never able to reach him, but they were together. They were seen together, drifting out to the Gulf. And again, is that Davis tried to lift the anchor. You got a 71-foot boat, and it takes a few minutes to get that anchor up. And by the time he was reacting and trying to pull that anchor up, they were gone. And yeah, good.
Can the Coast Guard speak to how many rescues
there were yesterday. I heard you guys were pretty busy
Go
yesterday.
step up here.
All of the weather, really.
Yeah, there's approximately 10 cases yesterday, all up and down the west coast of Florida. So, I can't speak to any of them individually necessarily, but there were a lot of cases. We definitely had several boats that had casualties or were disabled out here, and the weather made that situation very dangerous. We had another vessel off of St. Pete here where the master was injured pretty severely and had to be medevaced in. Additionally, we've had any number of different minor cases that have popped up where people needed some assistance, at least preliminarily, and were able to solve the problem on their own. There's a small craft advisory in effect. We highly recommend people heed those warnings, and unless you're an experienced mariner and are skilled in navigating those sorts of waters and this sort of weather, recommend that you stay off the water.
How
they
large
not
of a
have
search
gone out at
area
all
are you
yesterday?
all out there?
Say
How
again,
large of a
sir?
search area?
Yeah, so it's 420 track miles is what we've searched so far. Basically, it's from about St. Pete Beach down to the north end of Anna Marie Island, and offshore approximately 3 to 4 miles.
What are the
This is a
conditions?
question for you or the sheriff, but what do we know about the charter company? Are there any discrepancies in their licensing, their registration? What do we know about them? Do they have the right amount of people on board?
Yes, ma'am. That's all a matter of an ongoing investigation, so I can't speak to it at this time. I'll assure you that any leads or anything that comes up will be investigated fully. That's all I
And it
can
would be
say.
the Coast Guard that would handle a criminal investigation if someone on board is deemed responsible?
It would be the Coast Guard who is responsible for investigating anything to do with the mariner's credentials or with regards to the charter company itself. Yes, ma'am.
The demise certification, a lot says how many people can be on a charter boat. Is that up to code?
Yeah. So, sir, again, it's ongoing investigation. I can't speak to that at this time.
Can you at least say whether they were licensed? You said you mentioned they were licensed, but they had proper licensing?
Yeah, so I'm going to leave that to the Coast Guard. Anything to do with the licensing of it is within the jurisdiction of the Coast Guard. It's not within our jurisdiction, so I'll just leave that for the Coast Guard to answer.
Again, as far as whether the licensing was appropriate or those matters, that's all a part of an ongoing investigation, ma'am.
And you were out there. What's that like when you're out there on the...
So I haven't been out there on this particular case. The role that we've played is mostly back in the command center, planning these search and rescue efforts. However, in the past, been out in these situations, and it's brutal. It's hard to find what you're looking for. A person without a life jacket on, that's a very small search target, and so the helicopter flying over. You're looking for something about the size of a coconut. And in a small boat, as you can see, the seas are so rough that the visibility and your ability to spot something any distance out is pretty small. So no, search conditions are not as bad as they get, but they're pretty bad.
How strong of a swimmer would you say you would need to be able to stay out there?
That's speculation, ma'am. I really can't speculate on that. I haven't been in the water out there, so I couldn't tell you.
I don't know if this is some for you or the sheriff, but if the captain of this vessel allowed these guys to go swimming in this, knew that they were swimming, could he face any charges for that? Is that?
Yes, sir. Again, that's a kind of matter of ongoing investigation. I don't want to speculate on what could come out of that investigation. So the predominant area of focus right now is on the search and rescue mission. We have 2 folks that are out there in distress and danger, and our primary focus from the Coast Guard's point of view is search and rescue efforts at this point in time. And as I said earlier, we've already searched approximately 400 track miles. We have several assets still searching right now, and we've run cumulative between the sheriff, FWC, Eckerd SAR, and our other partners. We've run cumulative approximately 20 search sorties to date this time. So we're actively out there searching for these folks, and my goal would be to bring them home, and the investigative process will work itself out.
How long do you plan to be out there for the rest of the day?
So for the Coast Guard's point of view, we're going to be out there all day actively searching. We're at some point, our crews are going to be exhausted. However, we do have a cutter, which you can see just offshore. It's one of our 87-foot patrol boats. They'll be out there through the night. And then we already have first light searches that are planned for tomorrow morning with air assets, with another HH-60 helicopter, and then surface assets, one of our small boats from the station. So we're invested in this effort, and we're going to continue as long as it makes sense to continue searching for these folks.
Does it surprise you?
Yes.
Does it surprise you that they would take a trip out in such adverse weather conditions like there was yesterday? I mean, as like a business decision versus, people's safety?
Again, that's speculation. I wasn't on the boat at the time. I wasn't in the captain's shoes, and I wasn't in the people chartering the vessel's shoes. I don't know how that worked out.
Would you have your guys out there on the water yesterday if they didn't have to be?
So what were there training evolutions and those sorts of things going on yesterday? I can't really speak to that. So usually when there's small craft advisory, we minimize our movements just because we don't want to inadvertently put risk that doesn't need to exist to our crews. We don't want our crews subjected to risk, I should say, that they don't need to be subjected to. But nonetheless, we do train in these conditions at times because we need to learn how and understand how to go out here and search in these conditions as well.
Can you talk a little bit about I know the surf and the wind and all that, just with the water temperature, with being out there almost now 20 hours since last seen, just what kind of role that might affect the two gentlemen that are out there?
Yes, sir. So conditions are rough and definitely adverse. However, we've seen it before. I'm sure we'll see it again in the future. People do amazing things to survive, and so our approach to this right now is that there are two survivors out there, and that we need to get out there and find them, and that's what we're doing. Is we're actively in a search and rescue approach to this mission right now.
I don't know if you can talk about this, just with the current, everything being so bad. If somebody is out there, they find themselves in a current, you're supposed to do something, right?
Yeah.
Is that like the same as a rip current or no?
Yes, ma'am. I'm not an expert in that field, but I think the safest approach is if there is a rip current warning, which there was yesterday, stay out of the water unless you know exactly what you're doing and you're trained to do those sorts of things.
Before you step away, can you give us your first and last name and your title, please?
Yes, so Lieutenant Paul Simpson, and I'm the Incident Management Chief for Coast Guard Sector St. Petersburg.
Okay, guys. Anything else? We're good. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Sheriff.